Those of you who are film buffs or even casual moviegoers have probably noticed that the film and TV industry is going through a very rough patch. Strikes, sequels, and remakes have taken over your timelines and local theaters. Let's break it all down. So, strikes. There are several guilds, aka unions, in Hollywood. These are the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, the Screen Actors Guild / American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, the SAG-AFTRA, and the Directors Guild of America, the DGA, as well as the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees Visual Effects Union, ITSE VFX. There are several issues each guild is aiming to solve, but I'm only going to highlight the most prevalent ones in this video. The DGA, Directors Guild, which was on strike, was looking for gains on wages, streaming residuals, safety, diversity, and creative rights, which they were able to secure in a new 3-year contract with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP, and they cover basically all the producers in Hollywood. We're talking Paramount, Universal, Disney, etc. The WGA, which is currently on strike at the time of recording, is looking for similar things as the DGA. Their largest goal is raising wages and residuals. Half the writers working in TV are paid guild minimums. And when that original contract was signed, it was probably okay, but now the show budgets have increased exponentially, and writers haven't seen any wage increases. Streaming shows generally pay less for residuals than broadcast TV. Streamers are extremely protective over their data, so it's hard to know whether a show is doing well or not. Writers are forced to take them at their word, and writers are just looking for compensation that's tied to the success of the show. I've got a clip here from the Raiders of the Lost podcast that I think explains this point very well.
How much money does the WGA want an increase for payment? So the guild revealed that their proposed deal would cost the studios an estimated $430 million every year of increases. Now, this is for all of Hollywood. This is for all of the studios to pay this as a group. So it would cost Disney $75 million extra per year. It would cost Netflix $68 million extra per year. It would cost Warner Brothers Discovery $47 million extra per year. It would cost Paramount $45 million. It would cost NBC Universal $34 million. Amazon, $32 million, Sony, $25 million, and then Apple TV, $17 million. When you look at the numbers, it's shocking how small it is. Like, Disney can afford an extra...
What does Disney make a day out of as a corporation?
They can afford an extra $75 million per year to pay the writers what they want. Apple can afford $17 million per year to pay the... It's when you look at the actual numbers...
Yeah, a lot of people have iPhones.
Yeah, it's absurd. And so, for perspective, in terms of its profit income... Netflix would only if the studios paid this new annual uptick in money to the WGA, Netflix would only lose 0.1% of its income. Warner Brothers would only have to lose 0.108% of its income, and same thing with Disney. It's 0.2% of its income. Not even a percentage. We're talking about a percent of their income in order to pay what the WGA wants. So the WGA is not even asking for that much.
First things first, definitely go check them out. I've got their link down below. So, like they were saying, the writers aren't really asking for too much, especially when you take into account how much these actual producers are really making. Disney, for one, makes that amount of money in a day, maybe even less, right? And so these writers are the backbone of the industry and deserve to be treated and compensated as such. The SAG-AFTRA announced about a few weeks ago that they were going on strike. This is coming after weeks of failed negotiations between them and the AMPTP, similar to the WGA. The SAG is asking for better pay, better working conditions, and provisions on the use of AI. AI is something I'll get to in a moment. But similar to the writers, actors are just looking for higher residuals with streaming services. And the SAG specifically has been in the news recently with tons of actors showing their support and how it's really affected the industry. A lot of these actors that would be going on press tours for their films, unfortunately, have not been able to, and have not been able to promote their films, which is unfortunate when you think about the marketing, but it's great that these actors are putting their foot down and showing these producers that, I mean, they mean business. You know, they're looking to get what they deserve. And unfortunately, there are some actors like Stephen Amell and Zachary Levi who have shown their dislike for how the SAG is handling things, but it kind of sounds like they're coming from their own quite selfish reasons. But that's enough. I'm not trying to put my 2 cents into that fire. So let's move on to the IATC VFX, who aren't currently on strike at the time of shooting, but it looks like it's only a matter of time. Several VFX artists have spoken about the unsustainable work conditions in films such as Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. According to a survey done by VFXunion.org, on average, 70% of VFX workers have worked uncompensated overtime hours, while 75% of these said workers are reported being forced to work through legally mandated meal breaks and rest breaks without compensation. This is insane. VFX workers have been going through it for the past few years, and unfortunately, the major media hasn't really picked it up and hasn't really talked about it as much. So I didn't really know too much about it until I did my own research. And the VFX union is quite new and relatively small, so they don't have a lot of leverage and backing. But when you really think about it, CGI is everywhere, right? Every movie, Avatar: The Way of Water, and tons of other films use some form of it. And so these VFX artists are needed more so now than ever, right? Unless you're Christopher Nolan and you decide to never use CGI. In the anime scene, there are tons of animators who've talked about the grueling work conditions and insane hours they've had to work to get these animes out on time, right? And unfortunately, they don't have the leverage, right, to kind of put their foot down because there's someone ready to take up their job if they speak out and get fired, right? And so, you know, I hope with this video and other people who've done similar things like me can kind of help bring light to this issue so that these VFX artists can get fairly compensated for their work. Now, let's talk about AI. AI is a major concern for all guilds. The SAG is concerned over the use of AI to use a person's likeness without fair compensation, which unfortunately seems like it's already happened with reports that Disney scanned the faces of a ton of background actors on their Mandalorian season 3 without their consent. Most likely so that Disney could use these faces with the help of AI on various other productions they have so they wouldn't have to pay these background actors. And like we talked about before, these producers and corporations have the money to pay these actors, writers, etc. They're just being greedy. And greedy corporations will do what greedy corporations do, right? And so the WGA is having similar issues where they're trying to protect themselves from studios replacing writing rooms with AI. And ChatGPT, large language models in general, are already writing full-on essays for people, right? And so it's not a major leap to imagine someone using a ChatGPT style AI to write on full scripts and basically replace the writing room altogether. The Directors Guild offered similar concerns over AI replacing their duties, but they said, and this is in quotes, they received a groundbreaking agreement confirming that AI is not a person and that generative AI cannot replace the duties performed by members. That's phenomenal, and I'm glad they were able to get that in writing in their contract, and hopefully these other guilds can get similar things written in their new contracts. But regardless, AI is a sore subject that will be debated on for the foreseeable future. I hope these guilds can get the compensation, protection, etc. that they deserve. Moving gears into why so many films are sequels and remakes, Matt Damon explained this very well on the Hot Ones interview.
So I think a scenario lots of viewers can relate to is sitting on the couch on a Friday night, going through the streaming services, cycling through the movies and thinking to themselves, they're not making movies for me anymore. As somebody who's been intimately involved in movie making for 30 years, what are the macro Hollywood conditions behind that sentiment?
Well, so what happened was the DVD was a huge part of our business, of our revenue stream. And technology has just made that obsolete. And so the movies that we used to make, you could afford to not make all of your money when it played in the theater because you knew you had the DVD coming behind the release. And 6 months later, you'd get a whole nother chunk. It would be like reopening the movie almost. And when that went away, that changed the type of movies that we could make. I did this movie Behind the Candelabra, and I talked to a studio executive who explained it was a $25 million movie. I would have to put that much into print and advertising, right, to market it, what we call P&A. So I'd have to put that in P&A. So now I'm in $50 million. I have to split everything I get with the exhibitor, right, the people who own the movie theaters. So I would have to make $100 million before I got into profit. And the idea of making $100 million on a story about like this love affair between these two people, yeah, I love everyone in the movie, but that's suddenly a massive gamble in a way that it wasn't in the 1990s when they were making all those kind of movies, the kind of movies that I loved and the kind of movies that were my bread and butter.
If you somehow don't know what Hot Ones is, then you're either living under a rock or you're just missing out. Please go and check them out. I've got them linked down in the description. Sean Evans and the First We Feast team do a fantastic job of interviewing tons of actors and other content creators in the space. But what he's saying basically is that Hollywood switched from putting creativity first to putting profits first. And so from a business perspective, I get why they had to do that. You know, like Matt says, technology has moved past DVDs and studios can't really count on that second wave of sales anymore. Streaming takes a lot of blame here. Back then, films would get their theatrical run, and then a few months later, they would get that second wave of DVD sales, like Matt mentioned in that clip earlier. But we transitioned over to films being released simultaneously on streaming and in theaters. And so unless you really enjoyed the theater experience, like myself, there was no real reason to not just stream the film from the comfort of your home. Then films were getting short theatrical runs before releasing on streaming. People would just wait out a few weeks and then watch the films at home. Today, films have longer theatrical runs, but they still eventually end up on streaming services. The convenience of streaming for us consumers has been its biggest detriment to Hollywood. So studios have had no choice but to bank on nostalgia by making sequels and remakes. They don't have to convince you as much to see a film that you can recognize. The hope is that if the original film is widely liked, then you will enjoy the remake just as much, or you'll enjoy a sequel that carries similar themes. From a financial perspective, it usually costs more to produce films with original ideas. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, this method hasn't really worked out for films like Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, both bombing in the box office. However, all is not lost. I still feel that films with top-notch stories, cinematography, acting, directing, etc. will put people in theaters. Top Gun Maverick is a perfect example of this. It's a sequel that is widely loved, and me personally, I might like it even more than the original. Indie films, however, have been having their moment, deservedly so. Indie films haven't really been affected as much by the nostalgia wave. They've been able to create their own original ideas, and they've been prospering from that. Films like Past Lives and Everything Everywhere All at Once, both A24 films, are some of my favorite films in the past few years. Hopefully, studios are starting to understand this, but if not, we got to vote with our wallets. This weekend, go and see a film that isn't shown in your local chain theater. Visit one of those unique theaters in your area and watch something that's completely out of your comfort zone. Go in blind, and you'll probably have a great time. If you like this type of deep dive video, let me know by clicking that like button and subscribing. For those of you who came to my channel for tech videos, don't worry, those are still coming. In the meantime, let me know in the comments some films you'd like to see reviewed. Other than that, I'm gonna holler at y'all later. Peace.